Hello and welcome to the Nexus. Today we are looking at Bitcoin, the cryptocurrency that has quadrupled in value during the pandemic. Or more specifically, we're looking at the people who have millions of dollars worth of Bitcoin but have forgotten their passwords. People like our guest, Brad Yasar. He mined thousands of coins years ago and they're now worth hundreds of millions of dollars. But he can't access them because he's lost the passwords to his Bitcoin wallet. And he's not the only one. Another young man, Stefan Thomas, made headlines recently when he admitted he also couldn't access his $240 million fortune. Now, he's tried to unlock his Bitcoin wallet 8 times, now has just 2 attempts left.
I wrote the password down somewhere, but this is now so long ago, and believe me when I say I've tried every way to recover it.
He may have given up, but lots of other people are offering him help online, including Alex Stamos, the former head of Facebook security, who says he can find experts to crack the code for a price, 10%. Now, even if that was a fair deal, what if the experts fail? Does that mean the Bitcoins are lost forever? We'll also be looking at the case of James Howells, a Welshman who's lost even more money than Stefan Thomas, around $260 million. Now, James threw his Bitcoin hard drive in the bin years ago. It was then dumped at a site managed by the local council.
Well, absolutely devastated, as you can imagine. I just wish I could go back in time and not throw that drive away.
He's promised to give everyone in the area a share of his fortune if the council gives him permission to search the site. But so far, the council said no. Now, these 3 men aren't the only ones to make these sorts of mistakes. It's estimated around 1 in 5 Bitcoins are dormant because of lost wallets and forgotten passwords. Now, that's equivalent to around $140 billion. To be fair to them, the passwords or hard drives were typically lost years ago when Bitcoins were worth just a tiny fraction of their current value. Who was to know they would go up and up, especially during this last year, the year of the pandemic. As I said, it's more than quadrupled in value, peaking at $40,000 a coin earlier this month. Of course, the big question now is it still a good investment, or is Bitcoin about to burst? Okay, well, let's get to our guest now. And as I promised, we have Brad Yasar with us. He's in Los Angeles. He'll be talking about how he lost his Bitcoin fortune, but still manages to keep a smile on his face. We also have Didi Taihutu in Lagos, in Portugal, a Dutch entrepreneur who sold everything he owned to buy Bitcoin and now travels the world with his wife and children as a sort of Bitcoin evangelist. And last but not least, we have the Bitcoin skeptic Neil Liversidge, a financial advisor from Yorkshire in England, who says he'd never advise his clients to buy Bitcoin. So let's start with Brad. Now, Brad, according to the New York Times, you've lost access to hundreds of millions of dollars worth of Bitcoin, which you mined more than a decade ago. So what's the story? Why can't you access them?
Well, the story is that when I lost access to those wallets that had that Bitcoin, Bitcoin's value was 0. It didn't have any value. So I wasn't being particularly careful about what was going on with those ones and zeros on my hard drives. And the main reason why I don't have access to them is I don't know what hard drives they're on and what computers they were on, and my access keys to those wallets. So it was just a combination of Bitcoin not having any value, being too early, and mining being more of an academic exercise in testing the network and seeing how it works, how I can transact with other people, but not necessarily looking at it as this is going to be a very, very valuable asset in 10 years, 20 years.
I see. So at the time, you had no particular reason to be very careful with them. Can we just take a look at them? Some pictures here that you sent us of your hard drives. You've sealed them. Technically speaking, what is the challenge of trying to break into them? Is it at all possible?
Anything is possible. Basically, the challenge is locating the wallet files and then figuring out what the password was to access the private keys. It sounds simple, but when you take into consideration that in the early days, the wallets were compiled by individuals, and you could put them in any folder you want, under any name you want, and there wasn't a standardized model, or there wasn't all these graphic user interface wallets that came later on that have recovery options and things like that. It's less likely compared to today.
Yeah.
Today, it's relatively easy to recover a wallet that you might have lost access to.
Oh, why is that?
Because we've learned from past mistakes. Now there are a lot of technologists that use the asset and want to be able to use it. So ownership and usage of all crypto assets has become more and more facilitated and easier in the past 5 years, I'd say. So the recovery is much easier. It's built in. When you create a wallet today, they give you your seed words and say, save these very carefully, don't lose them. This is your other key to access in case something happens to your password or your wallet. So it's the industry as a whole, it's evolved, and there are more checks and balances compared to 2011, when you built your own wallet, you compiled it, and received the Bitcoin in there.
Right, let's take a look at Stefan Thomas's story. His challenge is a bit different to yours, isn't it? Let's have a look. So Stefan was paid 7,002 Bitcoins back in 2011 to make this video explaining how the cryptocurrency work. Let's just take a moment to have a listen, because that's also an interesting story.
Bitcoins are generated all over the internet by anybody running a free application called a Bitcoin miner. Mining requires a certain amount of work for each block of coins. This amount is automatically adjusted by the network such that Bitcoins are always created at a predictable and limited rate. Your Bitcoins are stored in your digital wallet, which might look familiar if you use online banking. When you transfer Bitcoins, an electronic signature is added. After a few minutes, the transaction is verified by a miner and permanently and anonymously stored in the network.
Now, back in 2011, 7,002 coins would have been worth around $7,000. Today, they're worth $240 million. But Stefan can't remember the password to his so-called iron key, which is a heavily encrypted thumb drive. He's tried 8 times and now has just 2 attempts left.
People are offering various solutions, everything from the silly to for example, one person suggested, have you tried the word password? So that was one. Some people have recommended various mediums, psychics, prophets that I could talk to.
So Brad, Stefan is locked out of his iron key. Can you just explain what an iron key is?
Just like you said earlier on, iron key is an encrypted drive that has a somewhat of a self-destruct mechanism, where if there are enough unsuccessful attempts made on logging into it, it'll encrypt everything forever and lock everyone out.
Now, I've heard experts say that his situation, trying to break into an iron key code, is easier than trying to do what you need to do, which is to crack directly into your Bitcoin account, because you don't have one of those iron keys from back in all those years ago. Can you explain why it might be possible for Stefan Thomas, but so much harder for you to access your Bitcoins?
Like I said, anything is possible. The probability increases because there's one unknown there, and that's the code to access the drive. Once that's accessed, my understanding from his story is that he does have access to the wallet and the information he needs to access the wallet. It's just the drive encryption that's the barrier that's holding him back. In my case, obviously, I need to first find the drive, the correct drive that had the wallet, then find the correct folder and encryption that it was under, and then take that and find my either password or passphrase to access to my private key to move the Bitcoin. So it's less probable that those 3
Sure.
barriers are going to be overcome as opposed to the one he has. But anything is possible.
Stefan Thomas has had an offer of help from someone who's quite famous, Alex Stamos, Facebook's former head of security. He said on Twitter, for $220 million locked up in Bitcoin, you don't make 10 password guesses, but take it to professionals to buy 20 iron keys and spend 6 months finding a side channel or uncapping. I'll make it happen for 10%. Call me. I just wanted to know from you, Brad, does that offer, does that idea make any sense?
I don't know what exactly the approach he wants to have there. Obviously, that tweet is designed to get Stefan's attention and connect with him. I mean, again, maybe he has a method that will speed up the process, and he is correct in saying that trying to make more guesses probably is not the best approach, because once the drive is locked and self-encrypts, it's going to be nearly impossible to get anything out of it. Whereas now, if there is a more methodical approach to figuring out the password to the drive, it probably is an easier task. The parallel devices and things like that, I'm sure there's a method to that madness, but that's not my specialty.
Brad, let's take a look at the case of James Howells now, the Welshman who lost access to his bitcoins in rather different circumstances. He had 7,500 coins in a hard drive, and threw the hard drive itself in the bin back in 2013 when he moved house. His bitcoins are now worth around $260 million. Understandably, he's quite upset about it, and he's asked his local council in Newport for permission to dig it up in the landfill. He's even offered them $55 million. So far, Brad, they are saying, no dice. We don't want you digging up and disturbing everything, perhaps creating an environmental problem. But even if they did find it, Brad, what are the chances that his hard drive would be in a condition that could be used?
Probably very, very low chances that the drive is going to be usable, because most hard drives from 2011 had mechanical components and had magnetic components, and they had seals that protected the insides of the drive from oxidation and moisture and things like that are very destructive to both the data on the drive and the physical drive itself. I can only imagine, and this is just speculation, but after 10 years in a landfill, that drive is fully corrupt and irrecoverable. I mean, again, if he were to be able to find the physical device, maybe there would be some amount of data that can be recovered and saved, but who knows if that's going to even correspond to the sections of the drive that had the wallet and the information about how to access the Bitcoin.
Now, Brad, like yourself, James mined the coins years and years ago, and some people at home who perhaps aren't aware of how it all works would be wondering, well, if you mined them once, why can't you just mine more of them?
Well, you can, and I have been. I have been.
Sure, but it's much harder now, isn't it?
Oh, yes, that's what I was going to say. You can still mine. It's just the yield on the activity and the upfront investment needed to, get a lot of Bitcoin has increased exponentially. So every 4 years, Bitcoin mining difficulty increases, doubles, because the rewards get cut in half. And considering it started in 2008, 2012 was the first halving, 16 was the second one, and last year, 2020, was the third one. So we started with 50 Bitcoin rewards per block mined successfully to now 6.25. And that's already a huge reduction in rewards to begin with. On top of it, you add the Bitcoin mining difficulty increasing as more nodes come online and more people are mining. it's become very, very challenging to mine 50 Bitcoin in 1 month unless you have an industrial complex, left alone in a day on a 286 machine.
That's the thing, Brad, is that gone are the days of people being able to do it on their computer efficiently. They now need a massive amount of computing prowess in order to do it and make it worth their while. One last question for you before I bring in the other two guests. You're reported in the New York Times to be rather upset, sleepless nights about the fortune you've lost. But in actual fact, I just want to allow you to put the record straight.
Well, thank you. The reason why I wanted to share my story on New York Times was because they reached out and they were looking for people who might have gotten involved early with Bitcoin but lost access to it. And I wanted my story to basically inspire people that although you might have, not gotten involved in the early days of Bitcoin, you can still get involved and benefit from it, because people look at the price and they say, oh my God, this is too expensive now. I can't buy 1 Bitcoin. One, you don't have to buy 1 Bitcoin. You can buy a fraction of it and it's still a good investment.
Yeah.
And two,
no,
I don't have sleepless nights. I kept mining. I learned from that lesson that, any crypto asset in the future can be very valuable, and it's it has served me really well. So no, I don't have sleepless night. I'm perfectly fine. And since the coins that I lost access to, I've acquired more crypto than that, and again, it's been a wonderful journey.
Brad, you're an inspiration. I'm glad you're not devastated by it, as some would be. So this is the part of the show now where we look at whether or not Bitcoin is really worth it, the valuation. Let's take a look at the chart. Today, 1 Bitcoin's worth around $35,000, having peaked at over 40,000 earlier this month. Going back further, you can see its astonishing rise from an obscure cryptocurrency. Its origins go back to before this chart, to 2008, when, the story goes, it was invented by Satoshi Nakamoto, a pseudonym used by a mysterious Japanese computer scientist. Now, its rise and rise may look tempting, but the president of the European Central Bank, Christine Lagarde, is not convinced.
It is a speculative. It's a speculative asset by any account. I mean, when you look at the most recent developments upward and now the most recent downward trend, for those who had assumed that it might turn into a currency. Terribly sorry, but this is an asset, and it's a highly speculative asset, which has conducted some funny business and some interesting and totally reprehensible money laundering activity.
Okay, let's bring in our last two guests, Didi Taihatu and Neil Liversidge. Thank you both for joining us. Didi, I'd like to start with you. Your story is quite incredible. You sold everything, put it into Bitcoin, and now you spend your time traveling the world with your family. It does sound idyllic. Tell us how you got started.
It all started in 2013 with mining Bitcoins as well. In 2014, experienced the first crash, so I sold a lot of Bitcoins to break even with my investment, because we manually built all the mining rigs at that time. I lost my mother in a young age, so become an entrepreneur, to build up companies. Then I built up some companies, and then in 2016, I lost my father. He was 61, so I lost both my parents at a young age, which made me realize there should be more in life than just accumulating wealth. And it would be time for me to accumulate happiness. So I started to travel the world with the family, really liked that traveling around the world. And we just had some backpacks. We didn't have the Jeep Cherokee and the house and everything. And we enjoyed it. And then we just decided, let's sell everything we had, our house, our companies, our cars, our toys of the kids, and just go all into Bitcoin, support this monetary evolution/revolution, and see where it ends up, and just live this digital nomad lifestyle we have been living at that point. And till now, still living, completely decentralized, only with cryptocurrencies, without a bank account already for 3.5 years.
Okay, but you don't have a bank account. How do you go around the world persuading people to accept the way you want to pay them?
It depends, it depends everywhere now in Lagos. I found this beautiful house here in Lagos and I just went to the owner. I told the owner I want to rent it for a couple of months, but I want to pay you in Bitcoin. They will always start to laugh. And then I showed them an article about Bitcoin, where we are in future in their language. And then they're like getting interest. We go to the barbecue with them and then, okay, we rent the house for Bitcoins. Then I walk to the beach and I see the beach bar. I drink my Bacardi Coke with the sunset and I ask the owner, can I pay with Bitcoins? He starts to laugh. I teach him how to accept Bitcoins. And from that moment on, every day I pay my drink at the bar at the beach. The fish restaurant the same, the sailing class the same. And everything we do, we just try to talk people in a very nice way into accepting Bitcoin. And then we created an environment around us that we can pay with Bitcoin. And the first 3 years the first 2 years, I need to say, was really difficult. But Bitcoin is evolving so fast at the moment that it's not difficult anymore. Surpassing the banking system is not that difficult as people think it is.
Now, you're the kind of man who gives Neil Liversidge sleepless nights. Neil, what's wrong with what Diddy's doing and how he's trying to persuade others to do the same?
Well, let's correct a misapprehension to begin with. None of this gives me sleepless nights. And if Diddy is enjoying his lifestyle and he's got a medium of exchange which other people are happy to accept, then I say, get on with it, mate, and have a good life, and I wish you well. What I don't want to happen is that thousands and probably ultimately millions of ordinary investors who do not understand Bitcoin and they do not understand the technology behind it get suckered into buying something on the promise that its value ultimately will always increase, because mathematically that's an impossibility. It's not a sustainable situation. And if that happens, then a lot of small investors will get fleeced. And I've spent most of my working life helping to stop investors from being fleeced and instead making them money, not losing it. So
Diddy, yeah. So let's just let Diddy respond to that. Diddy, Neil is concerned. He would never let his investors, his clients, go anywhere near Bitcoin. Just doesn't believe in it. Can you persuade him otherwise?
No, I don't. I'm not in the business to persuade Neil. I can only tell him how to evolve with the technology we have. We have been always evolving. And when I was very young, 10 years old, and I was telling my grandma, okay, we are now going to use a plastic card to get money out of the wall. She didn't believe me, and she didn't trust the whole plastic card and that wall that was attached to a bank to withdraw her money for years. At the end, she needed to understand that it worked like this. Bitcoin, I think cryptocurrency in the whole, on top of the blockchain, is the next step in the evolution of money. This is not the reason why all the central banks are now building the same digital version, central banks' digital currencies, on the blockchain. This is the next step in the evolution of money. And either they just get in early, like me, and then you have a possibility of maybe even making some profit out of it, or you just evolve slowly into the evolution of money, and you will be using cryptocurrency in the future because the central banks, they will be giving you cryptocurrency, and you then have also a peer-to-peer cash that will replace the physical cash system we know now. Let's be honest, when the world goes cashless, what kind of cash are you going to use at that point at moment? I asked my daughter this week on the beach while I was walking with her, I said, okay, let's say there is no cash anymore in the world left. How are you going to buy something that daddy doesn't need to know or must not know?
Let's give Neil a chance to come in, because I know he's got some very serious concerns about whether or not Bitcoin actually has any underlying value. Neil, come in.
Well, I don't have any concerns about it, because I know that Bitcoin has no underlying value, it has no intrinsic value whatsoever, and it's only worth anything so long as somebody else wants it. And this is why the Bitcoin fanatics need to generate an endless supply of bigger fools than them who are going to want it from them. And the minute they run out of bigger fools, then the value of Bitcoin is going to decrease and ultimately it will crash and go to zero. So for anybody who is holding a lot of it, what I would say is, as a financial advisor, in terms of your long-term wealth, if I was you, I'd be converting it to the fiat currencies now, which you so obviously despise, but whilst claiming to despise, you so obviously covet. Because what do you measure the value of Bitcoin in? Answer, you measure it in dollars, you measure it in pounds sterling, you measure it in terms of fiat currencies. And if children want to trade glass marbles or baseball cards with each other, that's absolutely fine by me. And if Bitcoiners want to trade Bitcoin with each other, that's absolutely fine by me. But the minute that somebody tries telling one of my clients that they should be accepting payment for a day's hard work in glass marbles or Bitcoin, then it's gone too far.
Okay. All right, Neil Liversidge, Didi Tahatsu, and Brad Yasar, thank you all. I wish we could continue this, but we have run out of time, except for this one last story for the benefit of our viewers. One last Bitcoin story, very odd one. Go back to May 2010 in Jacksonville, Florida, and the very first physical transaction, a man pays 10,000 Bitcoins for 2 Papa John's pizzas.
People ask me, oh man, what an idiot, why don't you keep that Bitcoin? And it's like, well, you know, somebody had to start it off.
And those 10,000 Bitcoins today are worth $350 million. Well, that's all we have time for. Thank you at home for watching on your phones and on your laptops and so on. Until next week then, goodbye.